Alright, today begins the start of several of the rules expansion books that I'll begin into. Now, like it's said before, pretty much the player's handbook is the only one you would really need to start off with, but the holy trinity of the player's handbook, the dungeon master's guide, and the monster manual would be more than enough to get you going for not only months and maybe even years, but for decades. These ones expand on rules and give you more options and everything. So if you're someone wants more options, say you run a couple campaigns or whatever over the course of 3 or 4 years, and you want to start getting more options. These are ones that you could get into to help give you those more options. So this one is Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Xanathar is a beholder that he lives under water deep in the Forgotten Realms now. Someone can correct me if I'm actually wrong on that, but this one actually gives you more character options. So in the contents, here you can see it starts off gives you the chapters and the index of different types of characters you can do. So here it starts off with the good old barbarian, and it gives you what different for instance it gives you a what's known as a subclass or whatever, or ideas that you can use. This one's the path of the ancestral guardian. So what these do is it can give you more options of for each class to be able to give them more abilities and more flavor type of deal. So for instance, instead of just I'm playing a barbarian, and you can be like, well, I'm playing the barbarian of the answer of this ancestral guardian. So I'm a guardian of such and such god, and so that's been gone for from this realm for a while. So and of course they got cleric class, and like I said, what these do is they give, in a sense, the different subclass types for each class and everything. So you got ones for a druid, circle the shepherd. So now when it comes to healing classes, with the cleric and druid, I'm more of a fan of the druid because me, I'm more of a nature guy than I am a church guy. So that's just personal preference for me. Even though most of the time I play as a player, I tend to play more your melee type players, characters like your fighters, your barbarians, because I enjoy playing those. So and then of course you got another section for your fighter that different since it gets into archetypes. So for instance, one of the ones from a third that was introduced in third edition was the arcane archer. And so in a sense, it gives fighters this arcane archer gives the fighters the ability to start using more magic and everything. So it's for instance, you're thinking you're going up against oh look, we're just going up against a typical archer and everything, and then all of a sudden he starts raining down fire arrows on your ass type of deal. So something like that Hawkeye from Marvel comes to mind, or you could even say the Green Arrow from DC. So Monk is another character I like because being a big Bruce Lee fan, and I like the monk because like I said, being a Bruce Lee fan, I was always into martial arts and everything. So I've heard some people say that's kind of monk class is kind of underrated, or kind of underpowered compared to other classes and everything. So it also brings into the debate of the homebrew rules that people can make while doing their own campaign, so they don't necessarily have to follow the traditional rules in the any rule book. So they can well, hey, so we're going to do this and do something like this instead of what it says in the Dungeon Master Guide or something. So and so like I said, this book isn't necessary. You have to get I'll reiterate that the only one that you would necessarily have to get would be the player's handbook, even though you could get away with the starter set that I mentioned in the previous video to get started. So but as like a DM, like you want to get into like also get the DM guide and the monster manual, so like you could in a sense be able to have more options for your campaign and give you better ideas on how to run the game and everything. So even though like technically as DM you still could get away with just the player's handbook and everything. So I have played rogues before, so like my first ever character was like I mentioned this in my character creation video, was like a elven like a fighter thief under namesake of this channel, and like it was created in second edition, and of course the rules in second edition are a lot different than like what they are now in the fifth edition, let alone they were a lot different in compared to even third edition. So like and so like these later iterations I like for instance like the sorcerer, they actually break up sorcerer and wizard and everything, so they give a lot more options to like your basic classes, let alone like these optional ones. And of course like what's kind of cool is like I've noticed like is kind of popular is of course is the warlock character that you know, people kind of like to play. I think like it has to do some, kind of like with the Warcraft, like your warlock characters and that. So like people that are more familiar with Warcraft can probably mention about stuff like that, because I haven't. It's been years since I've touched Warcraft, so like like I'd have to delve back into that to be like not as clueless as I am right now. So like this guidebook is like in a sense good in the sense that like it gives you like different options, like different paths that you can do for like each class and everything. So you not just playing your typical barbarian or your typical wizard or fighter. You can then give him like a subclass. So like think of like backgrounds and like traits and stuff, but on like a much broader scale type of deal. So like and of course like it does get into the backgrounds here as well, and it gives you much more options, and like and it goes much more in depth into like life events and like also like a different type, like maybe like different ideas, like maybe you suffer a crime or something, or tragedy. Like gives you like ideas that you can use to flesh out your character even more. So like and here it also gets starts getting into like the what's known as here racial feats. So like for instance like your races and everything. So like you can like do like since like wood elf magic. So like depending on which like race you are, you can start taking these feats and everything. So like expand upon the feats instead of just giving like your generic ones that you find in the player's handbook and everything. So like just yet another option that you can use to like get your tips. And so of course this next chapter is also all about like tools that the dungeon master can do. So like it expands on things like fallen and like a idea of like sleep in your armor instead of like pulling it off and putting it back on when you're out like in the wilderness going to the trying to go to the dungeon and everything. So like and of course like it mentions the adamantine weapons. Like I think of like adamantium for like when it comes to something like that, I think of Wolverine with his adamantium claws and stuff. So like and it goes into even further depth on like tools and stuff that you can use, like for instance like a forgery tools, the forgery kit that like a thief would use type of deal. So this would be definitely something like that could be good to like expand on like on the basic through the Holy Trinity of the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, and the Monster Manual, to give like I said, even more options of like of adventuring, of fleshing out your characters, giving like a DM even more ideas. So like a like for instance in the earlier parts with like the like for instance the arcane archer and everything, like you could create an arcane archer and like start getting into more in depth in the backgrounds and everything. And so like it would give like a good DM would just start maybe using some of the like those ideas. So like you could be like an arcane archer, sort of like the Robin Hood type, or like you could like you further get into like something like going and down that route, and like you could maybe have someone from your past that like wronged you, and so that's why you become an arcane archer type of deal. So like it could be like I said, like I keep reiterating, it gives you more options to kind of like go back and forth between like the player and the DMs, and of course it gives like a whole like here it gives like examples of like different encounters that you can do like uh, and of course like what's typical is like they usually do like a one like a percentage roll. So like you would take a 2 10-sided dice and use one as like tens and the other one as ones, and like you roll per encounter. So like for instance, if you actually rolled like 100, you would come up against like a 1d4 frost giants if you're in like the mountain encounters, and of course it breaks it up by levels as well. So that way, excuse me, is that you're not necessarily getting like throwing your characters to like the wolves per se, like getting them too hard of a challenge type of deal. So like of course it goes like this ton of different like types of encounters, like urban, forest, hills, mountains, uh, just about any type of encounter you can get into. So like and of course like it also gives you ideas for traps, like instead of just your typical like pits or like your like spears that come out of the wall, like you could in a sense like do something on par with like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and the opening scene type of deal. So it gives you more options, sort of like that with the traps and everything. So like so well like I'll reiterate, this isn't necessarily a must buy. It definitely would be like a decent like book to expand like your D&D library, to give yourself even more options. So like now, do you necessarily have to go out and buy every single book all at once, or like have to sit here and like spend hundreds of dollars on like if not thousands on every single book? No, like you could what you could do is like each of one of your friends, you could all eat in a sense pitch in and like uh, buy like you each buy like a separate book, and then you have like maybe like whoever like you go to one friend's house and like he in a sense holds on to the books or something, and like you have one friend who buys the player's handbook, the next buys the DM guide, and the third player buys the monster manual, so forth, so forth, and until you have like your group's library and everything. So like but I mean, you kind of have to get like a decent group to be able to do that, because like sometimes you could get infighting, but like uh, I don't think like people that are playing D&D like regularly are going to have that necessarily infighting and everything. So the way to mitigate the expense of buying books is, like I said, to kind of like break it up so that you're each buying like one separate book, or maybe all of you pitch in like 10-20 bucks or per book type of deal. So like, and then of course the next chapter gives more expansions on spells, and of course like I know a typical wizard or sorcerer player, your typical spellcaster player would say spells are like ammunition. You can never have enough ammunition type of deal. So it's just like in a sense, this like not only expands on like character classes, but also the spells, and like you saw the traps, and like so this is just like another good book for to be able to like expand on like ideas and like tools that like you can use not only as players with like the different like subclasses, or like the arcane archer that I used I mentioned as an example. Like, you can also like as DM start using more traps and like different types of encounters, and like it ultimately just gives you like much more in the ways of tools that you can use to better like your experience playing D&D. So like I said, this is like a Xanather's guide to everything. It's an expansion on the first three books, like the whole eternity that I keep mentioning. So this would probably be like another good buy to get and everything if you're looking to expand your options and everything. So, but I'll reiterate, it's not a necessary buy, because in all these videos, I'll probably continue to reiterate that all you need is the player's handbook to get started and everything, and you could be fine with just that and everything. So but if you're really into it and everything, you're eventually, you're probably like me, you're probably going to eventually buy a bunch of these books and everything and go further down the D&D rabbit hole.